Okay, so I'm just gonna go ahead and get started. So hello, welcome back to my channel. This is the second or third video, depending on what order I release them in, that will be going up on my channel. So I had an amazing start really to this YouTube journey. I posted one video and then I moved back into my student flat and found it infested with rats. So that kind of threw me off for a little bit and I didn't really have time to make videos because then suddenly I was back into uni. But like I said, I don't want uni to deter me, but the rats really did. So I finally got everything in the flat back in order. And hopefully we're at the tail end of that. I wanted to record, even though it's late, a September wrap up. I actually had a pretty successful reading week in September, which I wasn't expecting because I read ACOTAR in August and then I thought that I would end up in some reading hangover and not be able to enjoy anything else for a long time. But I actually, read quite a few good books. So let's just jump right into it. I can't remember what I read first. What order? I feel like I'm slouching. Okay, so the first book that I read in September was Magnolia Parks. It's a book that has been recommended to me by quite a few people, or I've seen it definitely around YouTube, and then one of my really close friends in Australia told me I had to read it. And I really wanted to because it's set in London, and I'd like to start reading more books that are set in London just because I get so much more out of it, obviously, if I know where everything is. So many books are set in New York, and then they mention Times Square and Central Park, and then that's it. Nothing else means anything to me. So it was really nice reading something that was really, familiar. And I did make a reading vlog for Magnolia Parks, which I think I will post hopefully soon. I need to edit it. Like I said, the rats kind of threw me off a little bit. But yeah, so overall, this book, I think I gave it about 3 stars. I enjoyed it, but I didn't love it, and I actually had quite a few problems with it. I found both main characters equally annoying, and then it also annoyed me that BJ, the guy character, gets more stick, which to some extent he deserves, but then Magnolia was just so frustrating too. Like, she's definitely not perfect. And then my favorite character ended up being Christian because he was the one who kind of called her out on it. Yeah, so I think as a first book, it definitely set a lot of foundations for the rest of the series. It introduced a lot of characters who I'm looking forward to seeing more of in future books. I think my problem with Magnolia Parks when I read the first book was that I wanted to see more character growth, which obviously I'm assuming, well, I know now the author does kind of work on throughout the series, but when I was reading the first book, I felt like that character development could have been worked into the first book, and that actually there didn't need to be a series. That was kind of my fear, where I really would have liked a book that was structured around 2 people who have, a relationship and it doesn't work out, and they're both quite flawed people, and it's, where it's a case of right person, wrong time. And then throughout the years, you see them kind of come back to each other, a bit like Normal People or When Harry Met Sally, which is kind of the comedic counterpart, romantic comedy. That, I think, could have been really fun to explore, and I would like to read a book like that. But for me, with Magnolia Parks, it just felt like there was no development from the first page to the last page. That was my personal opinion. But yeah, and I do really like Jessa Hastings' writing style, don't get me wrong. Everyone goes on about it, and it is genuinely so beautiful. I think it gets even better in the Daisy Haites books. Well, I'll get onto that when I talk about Daisy Haites separately. But yeah, so Jessa Hastings' writing style, absolutely love. It is beautiful. Lots of great metaphors, analogies, really nice prose to read. I would say there were a lot of typos in this book, which frustrated me greatly. This is my literature snob coming out, absolutely 100%, but it just really annoys me when I see typos in published books. Moving on then to Daisy Haites. So I started the first book right away. I really like Daisy, I really like Christian. One of my other complaints about Magnolia Parks was that the stakes never felt high enough, because it was always just a matter of whether or not they were going to have a fight, BJ and Magnolia, and by the time they'd had 6 or 7 fights, I no longer really felt those stakes anymore because I kind of knew it was coming. But with Daisy, Haites, and Christian, both kind of belong to gang families. Daisy's brother is a gang lord of an art thief, but he doesn't refer to himself that way. So yeah, Jessa Hastings basically incorporated, for me, so much more into this book because there were so many references to art pieces, to music, and obviously in a gang lord you have fights, you have heists. Everything was just so much more high stakes in this book, and I think it made it a lot more engaging. I also definitely prefer Daisy and Christian's relationship to Magnolia and BJ's. I think probably most people do. It's definitely more functional. It's more of a case of there's a lot of things holding them back from being with each other. It's not just them, if that makes sense. With BJ and Magnolia, there's no real reason why they can't be together except for the fact that they keep messing up. Whereas with Christian and Daisy, you can see how there's all these other factors coming into play. So yeah, the stakes were there, but they were also more believable. Then I took a break from the Magnolia Parks universe and I started reading The Naturals by Jennifer Lynn Barnes, the author of The Inheritance Games. And I really liked those books. I read the first 3, I know there's 4, I haven't read the 4th yet, but they were good. They were just what I needed. They were really quick. I think I've mentioned this before in my TBR video that she doesn't focus so much on character development, and definitely I didn't really care about the characters themselves in the first book. I also didn't care about the romance or the love triangle or whatever that was. But yeah, I mean, it was good. It was solid. It was consistent. I liked the second book more than the first one, and then I liked the third one even more than the second one. The third one is set in Vegas, which was quite a lot of fun, and I definitely think, the third one was genius. Numbers are really important in that one, and I'm not a mathematician, but I could really appreciate how much research Jennifer Lynn Barnes would have had to put into even creating that premise. So yeah. What even is the name of the main character? My god. Cassie. That's her name. Okay, so in case you don't know, the book follows 17-year-old Cassie who discovered the crime scene where her mother was presumably murdered, though no one really knows for sure because nobody was ever found. But for all that she knows, her mother is dead. And then one day she is recruited to join a program. It's like a sub-branch of the FBI who track down children or teenagers who have special gifts. So one of the characters is like a human lie detector, and she knows right away if people are telling the truth or whether they're lying. Another character, Sloane, is really good with numbers and probability, which becomes really useful in the third book. Michael is a human empath, essentially, so he can read people's emotions and kind of figure them out psychologically. And then Cassie, the main character, and this guy, Dean, are both profilers. So they'll look at people and psychoanalyze them or analyze them and kind of work out what their motivations in life would be, what kind of murderer they would be. This book is very educational actually as well, just in terms of criminology. I actually did learn a couple of things which were really interesting. So after finishing those books, I then went back to the Magnolia Parks universe and I read Magnolia Parks, Long Way Home. Yeah, Magnolia Parks, The Long Way Home. I have it literally right here. You can see the beautiful cover. So this book honestly made me like BJ and Magnolia a little bit more, both of them. You do find something out in this book which puts everything into perspective, and suddenly the first book, the relationship, everything about it just starts to make a little bit more sense. They were still incredibly frustrating, but I did see personal growth predominantly in BJ. Like, let's be clear, he's still a red flag, but I would say that whereas in the first book he was just outright a red flag, in the second book he's more of an amber flag, kind of orange. He's somewhere in between like red and yellow, and then I'm assuming in the third book he'll be somewhere between yellow and green, maybe further towards green. I don't think Jessa Hastings is in any way trying to develop these characters into perfect people, which is fair enough, but he was definitely a lot more likable in this book, so that was a good start. Magnolia, I wouldn't say that she changed very much, but yeah, considering she wasn't as much of a red flag or as problematic as he was in the last book, I guess that's okay. But yeah, really, I was reading this book for crumbs of Daisy and Christian, and in order to get to the fourth book, which is again about Daisy and Christian. So I'm going to talk about that one, and I'm going to show it to you, The Great Undoing. I can probably just pull it up on Google and attach it to this video, but this cover is so, so, so beautiful. I love, you can see with the Monet's garden and then the statues, the influence of art and how many references are made. I'm actually going to the National Portrait Gallery after filming this because this book did put me in the mood to go there. Christian and Daisy go together earlier in the beginning of the book. And yeah, I really want to go, and it's very aesthetic and pretty and appealing. So yeah, let me see as well there if I can find any. I bought tabs and I need to start using them. How can I describe Christian Hems to you? Any opportunity that BJ and Magnolia have to kind of work things out or to get back together or to do the right thing, they lose, they mess up. Whereas with Christian and Daisy, I especially found in this book, they make decisions to get back to each other, to communicate or to do the right thing for the other. And that was just so refreshing to read about in the series, which has up till this point been so infuriating. And don't get me wrong, the series is still infuriating and I desperately need the next books, because let me be clear, these books are not great. They're not great writing. The writing style itself is quite nice, full of typers again, but overall, like, still beautiful writing style, metaphors, analogies. Especially with Christian, there were just some things that he said where he said, he was so mature. He was like, oh, as long as she's happy. Things like that, where you could see him making personal sacrifices for Daisy, which you just don't really see from BJ. Oh yeah, this is one line. She glances at me quickly and then its eyes back on the road, and she's holding that wheel so tight at one point I reach over and shake her hands loose, and she says nothing, just laughs like she's embarrassed. But our hands touched, and that's all I think about till we pull up to the gallery. Just sweet things like that. He says so often in this book. And here's another one. We lock eyes, and I think he thinks it's something he has over me, that he knows I love her. But actually, I don't give a shit who knows I love her. Or maybe I do because she loves someone else now, and I hate looking stupid. I'm sort of struck that we're here in my car again, and even though it's not how I want it, I'll take it anyway because the sun's behind her and it's lighting her up like she's got a halo, and to me she does. Oh, there's so many. I'm going down a rabbit hole right now and I'm getting so sidetracked, but here's another one. This line honestly defines the book and the conflict in this book. I can tell by the way his eyes go when they look at me that he loves me too, but you can ask anyone and they'll tell you for free, even though the lesson itself often comes at great cost. Love isn't enough, and it will hardly ever set you free. This book hurts so much. So that was the Magnolia Parks series. Overall, yes, I loved it. Probably the more that I've stepped away from it, I love it too. But would I recommend it? I don't know, because a lot of people probably won't like it. I think that it needs some editing and some revision, but I still enjoyed it. I loved Daisy and Christian, and honestly, if you're hesitating, read Magnolia Parks, and even if you don't like it, go into Daisy Haites and read that, because it might change your perspective on the series. It did for me. And yeah, and I still like BJ Magnolia, but anyways. Okay, so the next book that I read was A Study in Drowning by Ava Reed. I really like the cover of this book as well. I think she's the author of Juniper and Thorn or something like that. This isn't her first book, but anyways, I was on Instagram and I saw, I think, a post. She made this aesthetic post and she was like, oh, would you want this, and this in a book? And it looked very gothic, and she said, academia and enemies to lovers and blah, 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 and she had me there. So basically, well, I'll just read the blurb because it's easier. So Effie has always believed in fairy tales. She's had no choice. Since childhood, she's been haunted by visions of the Fairy King and found solace only in the pages of Angharad, Emrys Myrddin's beloved epic about a mortal girl who falls in love with the Fairy King and then destroys him. Effie's tattered copy is all that's keeping her afloat through her stifling first term at her prestigious architecture college. So when the late author's family announces a contest to redesign his house, Effie feels certain this is her destiny. But Hiraeth Manor is an impossible task, a musty, decrepit estate on the brink of crumbling into a hungry sea. And when Effie arrives, she finds she isn't the only one who's made a temporary home here. There. Preston Hellery, a stodgy young literature scholar, is studying Myrddin's papers and is determined to prove her favourite author is a fraud. As the two rival students investigate the reclusive author's legacy, piecing together clues through his letters, books, and diaries, they discover that the house's foundation isn't the only thing that can't be trusted. There are dark forces, both mortal and magical, conspiring against them, and the truth may bring them both to ruin. So, if I had to describe this book, I would say it's a mix of Agatha Christie meets Wuthering Heights meets Jane Eyre, with maybe a little bit of the Folk of the Air. But I would say there's certain characters in this book, well, there is a certain character in this book that definitely makes me think of Heathcliff from Wuthering Heights. It doesn't ever say what era it's set in, but you do kind of get the feel that it's set around the 20s or 30s. I wrote a review on Instagram of this book, and I think basically this book feels like heavy mist and rain, and it's so atmospheric. You can smell the salt and feel kind of dried salt on your skin. It's very visceral, and I really liked it for that. I would personally have structured the book slightly differently, because basically, if you couldn't tell from the blurb, it's based quite loosely on Welsh mythology. You kind of get the feeling from the names and the setting that that's where it's set. So you're trying to imagine essentially the British Isles, England, Wales, Scotland in a storm with rain, and you're by the coast. Now, I know very well what that looks like and what it feels like. So it was easy for me to read this book, and very cozy. And if you've ever watched an Agatha Christie episode, you'll kind of understand the vibes that the author was going for. The book essentially is a frame. Well, the book makes constant reference to this fictional piece of work called Angharad, which the main character Effie is obsessed with. I personally would have liked for the book to follow a bit of a frame narrative where we got actual passages from the book itself, so that it was more incorporated into the story rather than just referenced. I think that would have made for a really interesting reading experience. But then again, now that I finished the book, I do understand why the author wrote it the way that she did, because obviously it is a mystery, and so for mysteries to have that linearity, it works quite well. I think including a frame narrative probably would have turned it into a thriller. It kind of was, mystery and thriller are so similar anyways. But yeah. I also think that the author tried to pull off too much world building. I think she could have just set this book in the real world, but in the 1930s. And Effie constantly struggles to differentiate reality from fantasy. And I think that actually setting the book in the real world would have kind of added to that and heightened it rather than detracted from it. But yeah, for me, there were just a lot of side details that weren't really that necessary and made the beginning of the book feel quite clunky. But yeah, those get kind of ironed out because, like I said, the writing style takes over, and it's nice, it's cheesy, but it's cozy, and it grips you just because of even, the atmosphere. So if you like Agatha Christie, Jane Eyre, Wuthering Heights, I think you will enjoy this book. And yeah, one thing I would like to say there is that Ava Reid includes quite a lot of passages from like academic texts, fake ones that she has written herself, but it was quite comical actually. She writes at the start of chapter 11, "In this paper, I argue that Blackmore perceived the South as a fanciful realm of whimsy, trapped in a time long past, existing merely for northern writers to project their fantasies upon. In that regard, I contend that Blackmore is indeed a southern writer, but only in the South of his own imagining." She captured so well the kind of thesis at the end of an introduction paragraph in an academic work, an academic journal. And I really enjoyed it. I think the book also engages in discussions about authorship and whether it matters who writes something, whether what we write can kind of take on a life of its own. If you even think about the people who kind of contest or debate whether Shakespeare wrote his plays, you have people who staunchly try to prove that he did, others who try to prove that he didn't, and then you have the scholars who say it doesn't really matter. We have a collection of works and they're great. It doesn't really matter who wrote them. And I think it's really interesting how Ava Reid approaches that. So yeah, that's kind of the academic scholarship side of it that I geeked out a little bit about. But yeah, if you're a literature student, you probably will enjoy reading this book. So I gave it, it doesn't matter what star I gave it. I honestly, it's too hard to rate. Okay, and then final book that I read in October, I read 9 books, which is honestly not that bad. I don't know how people read like 12 or 13 books a month. But the last book that I read was Fable by Adrienne Young. This book I finished in one sitting. I think I started it at like 11 p.m. at night and finished it at 3 in the morning. It was good. It was easy to digest, easy to read. I think it is very YA. And what I'm finding with a lot of books at the moment is that they feel a little bit juvenile. I'm starting to feel it more when they're younger. So this book is definitely for a younger audience. For example, the romance felt a little bit underdeveloped for me. There is a second book and I probably will pick it up at some point, but I'm not like rushing to it. I have other things I'd like to read first. But yeah, I'm hoping that things will be developed more in the second book. But yeah, I mean, it was easy, it was enjoyable, it was a solid book. And I have to say, from the cover, with like the red hair and all of that, I was expecting something quite folklore-y, and it's actually about pirates. So full disclosure, read the blurb, it is about pirates. So it wasn't really what I was expecting when I was going for my, autumnal TBR. But yeah, no, it was good. It was fun, it was enjoyable, and it's pirates, which apparently I enjoy reading about. So yeah. Okay, that just about covers it. That's everything that I read in September. All right, that's it. Bye.